Hello and welcome to Today in Space, the All Things Space Science podcast, where we follow and share the most exciting things in the busy and ever-evolving space industry so that you don't have to. I am your Space Science podcast host from the East Coast, Alex G. Orphanos, and we are recording this from planet Earth. The date is January 25th, 2023, and it's episode 295. We're here to catch up on some space news. Wait, is it 295 or is it 296? It actually is 296. Things have been a little messed up since our last episode. The last start of the year, it has been certainly not what anyone planned for, and not what I planned for. The lab went down, the Mac had some issues, an old corrupt drive that we had to completely back up and then reformat. But the studio is back. We have our cameras up and running. Our audio appears to be working. So we are here for this new episode. We've got some space news here from this month since the beginning of the year that we're going to cover. We've got a ton of stuff this week. We have human spaceflight. We're going to talk about the Polaris program. We're going to talk about the Starship, which is in Boca Chica getting ready, and in Florida they're working on it too, so lots of exciting things. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped, and it's also brought to you by our 3D printing lab, AG3D Printing. Thank you for joining us, and let's dive in. Let's talk about the human spaceflight aspect, and let's discuss Polaris and Starship. So one of the missions that I'm very excited for that's coming up here soon is the Polaris Dawn mission. If you haven't followed already, the first all-civilian mission to orbit occurred with the Inspiration 4 team. They actually went higher in altitude than the International Space Station. The whole part of the mission is to help push forward this idea of human exploration and to make humanity better. Jared Isaacman is the commander of that. There's a competition, people were chosen, and the Inspiration 4 were able to go into space and travel on a SpaceX Crew Dragon, and really a mission of a lifetime. All the folks on that mission are really inspirational. That team is very powerful, and that's what I love about the Polaris Dawn mission is even more than I would say what we have today for astronauts. Yes, we have the expeditions on the International Space Station, and by no means are those any kind of joke or that they're not doing anything, but the sense of team, and I think part of that is the focus, right? There's only 4 people on that one mission, and it's somewhat brand new, It's an first all-civilian mission, going higher in altitude than the internet. There's some buzz, right? So the Polaris Dawn mission is the set of missions afterwards where Jared Isaacman is going to be the commander, but they're also going to be bringing this next crew up there to actually perform a spacewalk while they're out there. And again, pushing boundaries, going farther again than other missions have gone before, and setting records for humans in space that is not orbiting the moon. So pushing that distance and that boundary with the Crew Dragon. So I love following this mission. Seeing the crew train has been something that I really fell in love with during the Inspiration 4 mission, and so I've been loving these updates for the Polaris Dawn crew, and so I want to share some of that with you guys because you may not have seen it, and if you did, I would love to know what you think about it, what you're looking forward to, and what your favorite part of these private all-civilian missions are. It seems like these astronauts are almost in a group of their own. You could bundle the Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic astronauts in one bucket because the term astronaut is now taking on a new definition. Space flyers, as I think we were going to call them here on the podcast. And then there's the Inspiration 4 where they legitimately went to space and were experiencing all the risk and flight that's involved in doing so. So the Polaris Dawn mission recently was training, and they participated in a decompression sickness study at NASA's Johnson Space Center over in Texas. The Polaris Dawn crew, this article here is from polarisprogram.com, so if you want to follow along, they have their mission. The cause for the mission is St. Jude's Hospital. They have a bunch of science and research that they have kind of planned. Who knows what they're going to finally do, but get to know the team, get to know the mission. We have 4 astronauts. So Jared Isaacman, the mission commander, Scott Poteet is the mission pilot, a friend of Jared Isaacman's. Sarah Gillis is mission specialist. She is the person who, especially if you watch the Netflix documentary for the Inspiration 4, Sarah Gillis was the team's mission Sherpa. She was the one who was talking to them through all the good and the bad that happened during the mission. She helped train them. She walked them through this whole thing so that now she gets to be a part of this. Is just so cool. So it's really cool to see Sarah there as a mission specialist, and Anna Manon, who is a mission specialist and medical officer. And this team of 4 is going to be pushing the bounds of space and research. So the Polaris Dawn crew participated in a decompression sickness study to characterize the risk of the planned Polaris Dawn decompression profile in the 20-foot chamber at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, December 18th to the 20th. The facility originally served as a platform for similar atmospheric modulation tests in the early 1970s, ahead of NASA's missions to Skylab, the U.S.'s first space station. The risk of decompression, it says here, sickness, is lowered when the amount of nitrogen is reduced in one's body. Current extravehicular activities, or EVAs, decompression models, such as those used on the International Space Station, the place where they do spacewalks now, achieve this during a long-duration, 100% oxygen pre-breathe exercise in an airlock. The Dragon spacecraft, however, does not have an airlock, which is one of the challenges here, requiring the vehicle, including crew members, to completely decompress down to vacuum with a limited pre-breathe. So let's just break that down. They are going to be opening up the capsule to space so that they conduct a spacewalk while they're going up there, and they're exposing their crew chambers because it's a capsule. So everyone is going to be in suits. They're going to be doing a decompression in order to do that. So they all have to train for that. I mean, this is a lot of these private missions, and I think this also comes over from like tech in general, like this hype machine. There's no hype here other than what's happening. These human beings are putting their lives on the line to show us what's possible. Now, the crew here, they lived in the chamber for just under 2 days, simulating the mission's expected pressure and oxygen profiles to determine how likely it is for DCS symptoms to occur, if at all. Throughout the test, a team of medical professionals monitored the crew for symptoms, ready to intervene and provide immediate medical treatment if necessary. In addition to characterizing DCS risk, the event allowed the crew and teams to practice monitoring for and reporting EVA-related medical information over communication loops ahead of the mission's actual spacewalk. Something I love about space missions, especially when there's humans involved, but we've also seen this with rovers and stuff like that, is the tests. How do you test? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you've seen the movie The Martian and how they tested the rover on the planet Earth, and then they could do the same thing with Mark Watney while he was on Mars, being able to test and do an accurate test as close to the real thing as possible means that you're preparing for the real thing. So this type of stuff is super important for them to get ready. If they can practice, that feeling that I'm feeling, this is decompression sickness, I need to report this. And when you feel that bad, have you ever felt that bad before? So like testing it and doing all these things beforehand are huge. And the thing that really blows me away are the images that were taken on this mission, and just seeing the real people do these things. I mean, it seems simple, but it's not. And this is what's so beautiful about human spaceflight and combining the scientific mindset and challenging the current truth that we have today, right? That's the scientific thought process, right? It's like, you have a scientific mindset. You're constantly probing and questioning these things on what is real right now. What is the universe telling us that's real? And seeing these humans train like this and seeing them put on the masks and train in the place where they're preparing for decompression, that makes it real to me. That to me gives me data in my head to say, man, these people are really going out there to risk their lives. So a little bit emotional here on the podcast, but it's true. Robotic space travel is the least risky space travel that we can do, because human lives aren't at stake when there's a rover landing on Mars. But there's something about exploration and what we've seen in the last decade about like what's gone on with the interest in space. Robotic missions, unfortunately, they just don't carry that extra oomph that a mission like this carries. Now, whenever there are humans involved, there has to be a heightened level of safety and making the right decisions. And you have to balance that with not also overthinking it to the point where that can cause issues, being too safe and not making the decisions you have to make in time. So it's a great reminder that when human lives are at stake, we need to really step up our game. And even though that risk is always there, good training. I mean, Apollo 13 is a great example that I think everyone is at least somewhat aware of things can go wrong, horribly wrong, to the point where it's almost impossible for them to come home. But if everyone can come together to solve that issue, then what is there that we can't accomplish? So the Polaris Dawn mission training continues. The next time they have another training here, we'll dive into it. If you guys want us to do a whole episode talking about what this training is for these astronauts, I'd love to. Let me know. Hit us up in the comments for this episode. Email us at todayinspacepodcast@gmail.com or follow us anywhere online. Today in Space Pod on Instagram, Today in Space Podcast on Facebook, and Today in Space on TikTok. That's it, folks. That is our Polaris Dawn recap. Looking forward to the real thing.